My name's Ed Piskor.
I am Jim Rugg.
And my name's Tom Scholey.
We're going to talk some Junji Ito today.
Very excited to do this.
This is going to be, this is the first Junji Ito comic I ever read. It stuck with me, and I think about it often, and it made me a Junji Ito fan for life. The Enigma of the Amigara Fault.
Would be considered a short story. I think it's around 30 pages, maybe a little bit more. I make note of that because we do look at so many comics and we look at graphic novels, and lots of manga certainly runs hundreds and even thousands of pages. So finding a 30-page complete story I think is noteworthy.
Before this recording, have you guys ever happened upon this comic? Did you ever read it? Were you aware of it? Because it is kind of an internet darling. Like that's how I first became aware of it. It was like being shared on, I don't know, 4chan or Reddit or someplace, and a lot of people were talking about it.
Yeah, I heard about it from you maybe like a bunch of years ago, talking about it, and it sounded pretty fascinating. And it was at a time, I think the reason we were talking about it was because there was like recently some kind of like jailbreak where these guys were like crawling through these like really tiny tunnels and stuff. So it brought that to mind.
Yeah, maybe it was El Chapo.
I think so.
So the story starts off, they talk about there's an earthquake, a little seismic shift that reveals these gingerbread man looking holes in this mountain, and they become compelling in the true Oxford English Dictionary definition of the word, man. They have a gravity to them that pulls the adoring public who recognize their hole in the mountain. And it starts off with a guy, kid, teenager, whatever. He sees the phenomenon on TV, on the news or something, and once again he's drawn to make the pilgrimage.
Right.
Thinking about just recently, there was a Twitter moment talking about how people have been dying on Mount Everest this year, like a dozen people, and there is like a traffic jam that's like closer distance than we are right now of like mountain climbers just in a big giant line to like get to the top of the summit, take a selfie, and then go downward, man. That made me think of this book right here.
Yeah, it's a good comparison. I didn't think of this connection, but it's pretty good.
And like the guy in this story, he's drawn there just from like a general interest of hearing about it, but then he meets a woman who is sort of even closer to it
because she saw her hole.
Yeah, on TV she saw that's mine, and so she's there looking specifically for that.
And it opens very organically. We start with the one character, that's who we're following, meets the girl. Now we're following both of them, and pretty soon they get to their destination point, and that's when we see like lots of other people have had the same idea, so now we're part of this crowd that is formed around this fault.
Yeah, it's almost like Woodstock or something. They're all there. It's a big communal experience, and near the fault lines, there are scientists, people who don't have that attraction that everybody else who's there has, and they're putting all sorts of instruments inside the thing, try to see where the heck it goes. What created this phenomenon, basically?
Well, yeah, like you were talking about like it being like Woodstock or something. So there's like always like the first guy or whatever at Woodstock who like takes off all his clothes and goes like, running and there's a guy.
They call that setting precedent. He finds his gingerbread man, and the way that Junji Ito draws these holes, like,
This is noteworthy.
they're really interesting looking. Like the sort of line work on the inside of them, it reminds me, and certainly when you see the shot from inside the hole outwards, there are these parallel lines that continue through the whole thing. It's like a contour line of the entire shape. It reminded me of in the Crumb documentary, whenever Charles Crumb starts to go kind of insane and he gets that graphomania.
Yeah.
And the way he starts drawing wrinkles in clothing. It's like that kind of texture, which is perfect for this kind of insane, psychological.
It really
experience.
is. I'm so glad you say that, because it looks good on the page. There's a dimensionality. It feels like it goes into the mountain. It goes into darkness. It works looking in or looking out. We get both sides of the shot. But you're right. The drawing itself is sort of like a manifestation of what we might associate with madness or obsession or losing control or something, where you're drawing and you're just channeling this thing. That's a really good description, Ed. That's not something I noted exactly, but I did take note of how well those are drawn and how distinct they look. But that repeating line pattern is really the obsession part. That's the madness.
I think it was crucial. I think that the story would not have worked if he wasn't able to figure this kind of thing out. And that is a part of Junji Ito's mastery with all of his comics work, as far as I'm concerned. He draws things that don't exist, but he does it in a kind of a convincing way, and he uses a technique. His art style really lends to the subject matter, and that's probably like one of the best examples in across all of his works.
One other visual note on these shapes, when we first see it, we see several of them. You know, it's kind of a big panel where we're seeing like the fault exposed with all of these cookie cutter human shapes, and it reminded me of cave paintings.
Yeah.
Which, you know, another piece of a lot of his work and his very effective work is it does feel like it connects to something subconscious, something primal, something we can see and kind of like quickly associate, make associations with, recognize, connect to.
Yeah, it's a really compelling image.
The first thing I thought of is like, yeah, these are this is cave art. Very primal.
I think the reason why this story comes to mind for me often, and you see in comment sections on websites people saying the exact same thing, is because, you know, evolution is very, very slow to change inside of us. And we have these built-in fears that perhaps we don't even quite know about because we've never been tested. And reading this comic, it taps into these like primordial caveman fears that is sort of built into me. I'll speak for myself. That's sort of built into me. The idea of going off into darkness and not knowing what lies ahead. The urge to kind of like explore, you know, stick your hand in a hole and see what comes out. But then also the idea of, you know, we'll cut to the chase. The idea of like kind of getting stuck and not being able to like go back from where you came, but like just kind of like maybe push forward. Like to just think about that. It should never come up in one's life unless something goes terribly wrong. But he poses that scenario and it gets in your fucking mind and you could dwell on that.
It's so claustrophobic and it is so clearly communicated.
Yes.
Like whether you thought about it beforehand or not, it's instantly clear what's happening and it's very easy to get in the mindset of like stuck, you know, unable to back out. It's just
past the point
makes,
of no return.
It's the skin crawling part.
Yeah.
You know, that like very visceral, very real, very physical. You can almost sense that texture of like, okay, I'm stuck, I'm panicked.
And it's being 100% stuck. It's not like my hand is like my ring is caught on the garbage disposal and I'm jiggling it. This thing is built for the contour of your body, and then you walk into it. So you have no
wiggle room.
No wiggle room.
Yeah, like it.
I'm getting itchy thinking
Yeah,
about
me
it.
too.
Yeah, I can tell. Like I had a really strong, like visceral reaction to the story, and I'm sensing that you guys did too. You know, it's really like I feel like he's created a classic with this, like the kind of story that you know, like the Curse of the Monkey's Paw or something, kind of like scary story that like, you know, kids will tell each other with like a flashlight under their face for like years. You know, it's just that kind, like he created a new classic.
It feels like it based on the amount of text and videos and things around it online. Like this is a story that has resonated with enough people that there's a lot of feedback about it.
The boy meets girl, and they build some rapport. That's like the one kind of like human thing in this story. And then there's that other guy. You know, when she's talking about I saw my hole on TV. There's a third party. Hey, you did too? Me too. And then he eventually finds his, strips the hell down. When he disappears into his gingerbread man, his cookie cutter guy, the drawing is magnificent because you have the shape, and some parts of his body, it's kind of like, you know, like your chin. When you draw the profile of a human body, it's like your chin is supposed to touch the tip of your toes, and like the body has like a S-shape contour. So he is mindful of that, and you see the cookie cutter shape, and his head is kind of coming out of it a little bit, but then the small of his back is kind of going in. It's like a luscious drawing, and it adds to the creepiness because Junji Ito is drawing these lines. You like, and so like these thoughts are in his mind of like it's almost like fetishizing the image, like right before he pulls the legs and arms off a centipede or something.
Yeah, for sure. It's what Tom is talking about, is like that visceral reaction because of all these things. It is an obsession of how does the human body fit in there.
And once he goes in, people kind of freak out and they're like, how do we get this guy out of there? And that kind of puzzled me too. Like, what do you like hold on to get him out of, like, you know, how, like, it seems like it would be impossible, you know.
And it's deep. They're putting instrumentation in there that is 30 meters deep, man. And then they sort of they hit a snag or something, and they just have no idea, totally baffled.
Yeah, just darkness. They can't really see anything beyond that, and he disappears beyond that point, where it's just he essentially disappears into this.
He has a series of dreams, and in his first dream, he sees this guy. What happened to him? And he imagines him just being stuck somewhere in the middle and like screaming and like, "Hey, get me out of here!" And like we never get a moment where we actually see, you know, like the true, but we have this dream, and it's like just like skin crawling enough, you know, that we feel like we've like witnessed like the actual fate of this character.
Day 2.
Day 2, they wake up and the girl has found her hole. She's found the shape she's been looking for.
She gets that glazed look on her eyes, man.
Yeah, and so we see visually there's about a page that really kind of gets to the psychological part, the compulsion, the I can't help myself, the moth to the flame. And I think that's the other part of this story that really makes it work is like it's disturbing at first seeing these shapes and the guy crawls into it. Then it becomes more disturbing, like the self-destructive pull that we feel. It's like, it's my shape, I have to go into it. I have to enter that. And that's what a lot of these characters are experiencing, and it's totally summed up with her. You know, we see her eyes that are like just transfixed. She's shivering, you know, almost like she senses that she can't help herself. And to me, that's a very real part of it.
Yes.
That's any self-destructive behavior we all engage in, whether eating poorly or not, exercising, drinking, any of this stuff. It's human nature to sort of do that in a you-sized hole. I get it. Like, I understand.
Well,
I'm glad I'm not confronted with that.
This is what's at the bottom of the appeal of horror stories. Is this like we're scared of the dark, but we're drawn to the dark. It's totally spelled out in this story.
Right.
And it's compulsion. He's illustrating a story about compulsion and exploiting compulsion. And everybody has their vice. Just so happens that this girl wants to walk inside her cookie cutter hole, man. So what do they do, man? The chivalrous young boy, he hooks her up, man. I'm going to fill this thing up with rocks. You're not going to have to worry about it.
And she also, one other point is she talks about a loneliness. You know, and so besides filling the hole with the rocks to kind of protect her, he's also there for her now. You know, so he's really trying to combat the things that she is feeling that are, you know, depressing her, troubling her. He's trying to fill that in every way possible, emotionally and physically. And he seems to do so.
I was thinking a lot about like what this story means, like metaphorically. And like part of it seems like, especially people who are like the age of the characters in the story, everybody's trying to figure out what's my place in the world? Where's my slot? Where do I fit in? And they found this like very like obvious, very concrete space where you fit in. What's the plan? Is there some large plan for me that I just need to learn what it is? Where do I fit in? And once you find what that thing is and you head down that path, it's almost like you're taking the train to death. Like next stop is just the you know.
And it is very hard to change course. You know, if you think of it as a career or something, you get 10 years in, you have mouths to feed, a house to pay for, you know, all of these sort of trappings of life. You can't really just back out of that. You can't just switch directions or change all at once. It's a very tough process. So I think that's a good interpretation of this.
There's like another interpretation, which like kind of leads to like sort of what happens next in the story. They're in like a tent together and they're talking about it, and they sort of both decided like, okay, we're not going to do this, and he like, you know, plugged up the hole there, and you know, we're not going to do, and then they kind of you know, we assume like they make love, and then when he has, I think that's when he has his second dream,
Right.
And in that second dream he sort of, his subconscious theorizes that these holes were like a form of punishment that cavemen came up with, and if you got exiled from the tribe, you'd have to find your hole and walk into it, and that as you work your way through this thing, you're being ever so subtly stretched bit by bit to the point where when you come out the other side, you're this like just weird taffy version of yourself. And he pictures this happening to him, that he's back in the caveman days, and that, you know, that's what awaits him on the other side. And then he wakes up and she's gone.
This is the part too, like when he has the dream, and he's talking about just like how the rocks like ever so slightly change the shape of the body. Makes you think of corsets. Makes you think of Chinese foot binding, and the fact that you really can change this
Right.
shape of one's body. Like there's some element of reality in this that makes you think that this sadistic fucking Junji Ito like just came up with something that could plausibly happen. Like obviously probably couldn't, and how would you test that? But just like knowing that similar things kind of exist in our world, that adds to the fucking horror that I have and the dreams that I have about this fucking story.
Who knows? Maybe an impulse for the story as well for him. Coming across something on foot binding or something of that sort.
Yeah, or like the neck stretching with where you put the series.
Yeah,
of
there's
rings.
several examples of this stuff. I just saw a documentary on someone with cerebral palsy and would have to wear braces at night whenever he slept because as his bones grew, everything else needed to grow in conjunction, and so it's the same deal. We don't think poorly on that. We think of that as like a medical breakthrough, but it's the same concept of like trying to shape your body and helping it grow in a certain direction.
Like this is a short story, but he does get us to this like really fantastical conclusion by very slight degrees. It makes it very, very believable, and that you could believe something like this could almost be real.
He wakes up from the dream.
She's gone, and of course he assumes the worst, and he's right.
Totally right, man. She spent all night, man, pulling those rocks out of that hole, and she disappeared. So she walks into the hole. He knows it. He shines a flashlight in there. Can't find her, of course, man. She's walked in there long enough ago that she's further than the eye can see. He's a little bit sad. He's sad. He's in despair. Throws his little flashlight down. God damn it, if that flashlight doesn't shine a light on his exact cookie cutter gingerbread man. Mullet and all.
Yeah, that was like I didn't notice he had a mullet until I saw his silhouette, and it's like, oh, okay, yeah.
It's great. That's a great moment with the hair and stuff as being the exact shape. She refers to the shape as silhouette earlier in the story a couple of times, and it makes me think of like as character designers, as part of the job of cartoonist, your characters should be identifiable in silhouette. So in a weird way, you can connect this whole concept to the cartooning, at least in that one.
I mean, that's just another level where this story like really comes together. Is it's like form and content sort of come together really nicely in that way.
And that's what you keep a spare amount of characters, just a few, and those shapes, they look like the characters because in service of this story there really are no other characters that look like that. Like the first guy is purposefully lanky. She's the one female, and the shape is female clearly, and then you got his little
yes,
his little Captain Planet, his little Luke Skywalker fins or whatever.
It's the third iteration that we see of these shapes as well. We've seen them from the outside, daylight, where you see the dimensionality going in. We've seen them from the inside looking out, which is kind of a weird, trippy part. And now, outside of the flashlight, we just can see like kind of the darkened wall. They are just flat silhouettes. It really is the cave painting.
And what happens? The guy walks in.
How can't he?
Yeah.
We had no control over that.
He walks in, and then flash forward 6 months later. And I don't know about you, but like my first thought when these guys are walking into the damn holes was like, yeah, let's see what's on the other side of that mountain. And it takes 6 months for some scientists or somebody to like figure that part out.
Right.
They're on the other side of the mountain, and there is no discernible human figure type of fault. It's just a bunch of big giant cracks. And then they take a look inside, man. Then we get the punchline.
Well, yeah, I mean, because like speaking of like cave paintings, those cracks do have sort of like a cave painting quality of this like vague, very, very vague human shape of these sort of like spirally limbs, spirally body.
Like twiggy,
And yeah, so they look inside and they see there's something in there and it's still moving. Like
Yeah,
it's
the
not like
money
they found a dead body. They're finding something that's still heading towards them.
We get the money shot, man. And they describe it as it was like an earthquake that unearthed the shape. But it's also the earthquake that manipulated the interior of the mountain even further to like create this gnarly, gross, foot binding, corset, body dysmorphia fucking thing. That's what sticks with you. Like just knowing that guy has been pushing for 6 months slowly, and now looks like
Yeah, an alien, but like not an alien from another planet, like just like this totally alien creature that like we just can almost not relate to at all, but can relate to just enough to be horrified.
yeah, the face is like the in season 1 of X-Files. There's the fluke worm. You know, it's like he's got like the fluke worm face, man, because he's just pushing his face off against the rock and just
All scraped and like
Yeah.
skin
Blistery,
peeled off.
yeah.
Yeah, disgusting.
And like the punchline is this beautifully drawn image of exactly what we're talking about. We don't see a sequence. We don't see people saying, "Oh, let's help this guy out." You know, it just ends with this like exquisitely drawn image, the perfect image. The story only works if this image pays off the way it does, and it pays off beautifully. And I imagine, I mean, like we all saw the Manben episode of with Junji Ito. I imagine he probably redrew that thing a number of times to get it exactly right, because it needs to work, and boy does it work, and it sticks with you too.
yeah. Well said. We'll have the Junji Ito Manben episode in the link in the description below, because that is must see TV. Certainly as a companion piece with this episode we're discussing right here, and you'll see everything we were kind of talking about, where he has to draw many different, like he has to draw things that don't exist but have some root in real life, and the struggles he goes through to like make that thing happen. On that episode of Manben, he's working on a story where the idea is that every year you develop like a new like kind of like skin over top of your body, and like some 40-year-old lady like starts to like peel her skin away, and as you do, it's like rings of a tree, and she pulls off like 25 rings to reveal like this little like baby, and this like little kid head, this little kid body's like underneath all of that skin. It's really messed up. There's a reason why he, in that Manben episode, is being interviewed in like one of those like cat sanctuaries
The
or
cat
something.
cafe.
Like, yeah, exactly, man. It's a good palate cleanser for that goddamn mind of his, man.
Interesting. He's one of those guys that doesn't work with assistants.
Absolutely.
Pretty rare, except given the subject matter, it would be hard to communicate this stuff to someone else. I suppose you could have them, you know, spotting blacks or doing photo reference backgrounds, but so much of his material is based on trying to conjure these images, and it's not really something. I can't imagine working with somebody and expecting that to come out right.
The other thing too, to make that process easy for himself, or easier, he also creates a lot of his own tools. And in that episode of Manben, you guys will see that as well, man. A lot of weird erasers and little pen gimmicks that there are lines in here that I wouldn't know how to replicate, and he created his own.
Yeah.
Yeah, he makes almost like a miniature rake that you can have like all these points of black that you can.
Yeah. Super inventive creator. Definitely tapped into our darkest psychological fears.
Mm-hmm.
And this fault of the Enigma of Amigara fault is one of the best examples of that. We review this story because it's very accessible online. You could just Google it, and it won't take you but 15 minutes to read, but boy, it's going to stick with you for a lifetime.
I would say one other point you mentioned, it taps into our fears, kind of connects with us as readers. In this particular story, the characters aren't really characters, right? We don't learn anything about them. Mm-hmm. Good people, bad people. We have no inkling about them.
Yeah, what their life was before they got here.
I think that's it very much lends itself to us as a reader just stepping into them.
Yeah.
Very easily. It could be anybody, whatever your personality may be or your vice may be, however you're going to relate to this story. He doesn't have any baggage on these characters that would hinder you or separate you from them. You just sort of go right in, like you're one of those guys that went to the vault to check it out.
I imagine the target audience is people who are like around the age, like young people around the age of the characters in the story. And so that like kind of putting this like through sort of like a Freudian lens. Yeah, exactly. Because I feel like this story, like you suggesting us read this, was almost like a setup to let me like do my thing, do my Freudian thing. Because it's like, you can't escape the sexual interpretation of it too. There's like a big part of horror, like especially like the American brand of horror, but just horror in general, is like the subtext of that if you have sex, horrible things are going to happen to you. And that's kind of like this. They Friday the 13th or whatever, things like that. And they're in their tent, they have sex, and then, they both she dies and then he dies, or get this like horrible fate. And so I mean, it seems like it's got that element too. Okay, so here's some quotes I pulled up from the story, and these are all pretty much in a row with each other. I'm scared. I'm going to have to enter that hole. It's just gaping at me. Come into me. That's what it's saying. All right, if you're so scared, I'll help you. I'll fill this hole up. Just watch me. Now, like how can you not read that and think that this thing's like it's about sex? It's and maybe about the moment of going from being a non-sexual being into being a sexual being, and how that's tied to so strongly to mortality. And it's kind of like once you create offspring, it's almost like you're like a husk, and then these offspring take over, and you who cares what happens to you? You're sort of, you can see your own fate. And I feel like that, has to be somewhere in there, and like why like this story just has such a pull.
Tom, you did it again, man. Jim, what you were saying though reminded me of like the idea that these aren't like, they're not fully formed characters, and nor do they need to be, because their effectiveness is in the fact that they lack a lot of that. You could put what you want onto these characters. Made me think of it being almost like the writing version of that Scott McCloud bit in Understanding Comics, where he draws what he would call a realistic face and say that, there might be 10,000 people in America who can identify with this exact bone structure, hair color, face type, and then he starts to pare it down more and more to the smiley face. So these are like the illustrated versions of smiley face. Boy meets girl. I don't even know that they have names. For as much as I remember about this damn story, I don't remember their names. Put whatever name you want on these characters, man. So I think that's like a really effective excuse to like not flesh out these characters in any way. They are not the MacGuffin.
And Scott McCloud got that idea of like masking from manga.
Cartoons.
Those are all the things he cites. He cites a couple sort of like Western examples, but it really was like his study of manga that really like brought that discovery out for him.
I think we hit every key part, certainly every key part of my notes.
Yeah, that covers everything I have.
You good?
Yeah, I'm good.
Let's get the heck out of here, man. You guys know what to do. Like, subscribe, and follow the YouTube channel. Once you do that, hit the bell icon. It'll let you know whenever we have new videos available.
You can pick up Cartoonist Kayfabe merch at our spread shop. There's a link below this video.
Tom, drop some links where people can find your work.
Okay, yeah. You can follow me on Twitter at Tom Scioli, and my website is tomscioli.com, and then my Instagram is Tom_Scioli.
And all those links are in the description below. We're going back to making our own comics. You guys know what your marching orders are.
Read more manga.